Well, so far we talked about greed and what it means and how bad it is, right? But today we're going to get into how to identify greed because you know what it is. Now you can identify it and overcome it. So, welcome to part two of the insatiable hunger for more, part of the seven deadly sins.
And it came to pass in a time of antiquity, in an era before the realms of man and creature were set asunder, that the land was defended by the holy knights, who did wield a great and wondrous power. Great was their fear, and reverence they did command. Yet from their own ranks, a treacherous company arose, who did betray the kingdom, and became sworn enemies to all who held the holy charge. They were known throughout the land, and their infamy did spread as the seven deadly sins.
What's good, peeps? With all their shenanigans 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year, I am your host that does the most, Maestro DJ Jones. welcome back to the Maestro Show, the only show where you may not be understood, but you are never underestimated. Today is part two of the insatiable hunger for more. Still talking about the seven daily sins, and we're diving deep into greed. A couple days ago, we talked about what greed is. Today, we're going to talk about how to identify greed. Because now that you know what it is, now you go overcome it. Before you go overcome it, you got to first learn how to identify it. Now, before we get into it, let's figure out where did all this greed, this corruption came from. The insidious culture of greed and self-centeredness and corruption is not a novel phenomenon, meaning this isn't anything new. It's been happening since the Bible days. It's been happening since the beginning of time. Consider Genesis chapter 6. During this era, there was an overwhelming amount of greed, corruption, sexual debauchery, and violence, and an insatiable lust power that caused the Lord to regret making mankind. No, literally, if you read Genesis chapter 6, verse 6, it literally says that he regretted making mankind because all the greed and corruption that was going on, it was a lot, right? But Noah, however, found favor with God. So what happened? He sent the flood, right? It rained 40 days, 40 nights, and then God promised he'll never do that again, right? However, somewhere along the way, this culture of greed and lust for power, it resurfaced, plunging the world back into the incredible social distress and human suffering that existed before the flood. So after Noah's flood, Noah's son Ham initiated the process of decay by exposing his father's nakedness and broadcasting it to the rest of the world. As a result, Noah's placed a curse on Ham's descendants. The reason for this was by the time Canaan was already sexually perverted and had influence to his father's Ham. Ham had failed to address the problem, which ultimately led to his downfall and the actions he took against Noah. You can read all about the Hamitic curse in Genesis chapter 9, verse 24 through 27. Now, Ham detested this curse. What does detested mean? Hold on. Now, detested, before we go any further, detested means that he really didn't like the curse. He disliked it. You know, instead of being intentional, be like, okay, I messed up. No, he didn't like it. But let's go further. So because he didn't like this curse, he had a son named Cush who also despised the idea of serving his brothers. Consequently, Cush embarked on a journey and migrated to the land of Saba, which is modern-day Ethiopia. From there, Cush had a son who he named Nimrod. Oh, sorry, Nimrod. That's his name. Nimrod means "let us rebel." It's getting juicy. Let's keep going with it. Cush trained Nimrod into a formidable warrior and instilled in him a deep-seated desire for greed and power. He dispatched Nimrod to conquer the land of Shem and Japheth and establish a kingdom that would control the descendants of Shem and Japheth. In essence, Nimrod was attempting to reverse the curse. Nimrod embarked on a relentless campaign of burning, plundering across Africa, utilizing fire and sorcery to annihilate or enslave entire groups of people along the way. He married a prostitute named Samarius. We're going to call her Sam. Her real name is Samarius. We're calling her Sam. And together, they established the world's first great empire, Babylon. This empire was built on a culture of greed, corruption, self-centeredness, and a lust for power, relying on the enslavement of other nations. Their reign of terror utterly enslaving and plundering people what is now known as the Middle East. This all happened in the Middle East, what we call today the Middle East. During this time, child sacrifice, male and female prostitution, sexual debauchery at the altar, millions of murdered for non-compliance, poverty, starvation, trafficking, you name it. Everything that's going on nowadays, secret police, racism, corruption, oppression, you name it. Everything that's going on nowadays, it started with Babylon. It all originated from the devil through these two people. But hey, there is hope. There is hope. Trust me, there is. Now, fast forward, we have King Solomon that came in and through under David. You all know about King David, right? Yes, he was corrupted at first, but what did he do? He said, God created me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me. And so God did. And throughout his days, until his death, he lived a good life. They had a son named Solomon. He also taught Solomon these same things. Maybe you need to rule with compassion. You need to rule with love. All this was in contrast to King Saul, who ruled with a Babylonian culturized by greed, self-centeredness, and corruption. When God appeared in a dream to Solomon, he sought guidance on how to rule his people justly. And that's exactly what he did. During Solomon's reign, there was no slavery, there was no unemployment, there was no poverty, no social distress, any of those things. Because he used the kingdom of God, and it prevailed so strongly that the surrounding nations flocked to Solomon and said, hey, how are you doing this? Give us some of that God that you got, man. I want some of that. This is why Solomon penned Proverbs chapter 13, verse 22, saying, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, and the wealth of the sinners is laid up for the righteousness. However, all this period of prosperity and everything did not last long. Yes, it did not last long. If you remember from last month, we said, how Solomon had lust take over him. Same thing here. So Solomon had like 700 wives and 300 concubines. If you don't know what concubines mean, pretty much concubines are hoes. He had prostitutes, 300 of them. So all in all, he had if I'm doing the math right in my head, he had, 7, 8, 9, 10. He had 1,000 women at his disposal. Hey, from last month, that's what we call what? Lust. Since all the pagan religions originated in Babylon, the culture of women Solomon was closely associated with eventually took over him, leading him to adopt their religions, their toxic marketplace culture, and their ideologies. This was the Babylonian culture of greed and corruption resurfacing all over again. I'm going to make this brief, but after Solomon, he had a son who also took over, who also was led by greed also. So much so that it got so bad to where they made a group against him to try to overthrow him. Now, consequently, this polarized of political systems that happened ultimately resulted in the division of the nation into two separate kingdoms. Now, for 450 years, God's people were divided into two hostile kingdoms, leading to their downfall at the hands of none other than the Babylonians. If you read between the lines, if you really think about what's going on back then, you compare it to now, the same thing is happening right now as we speak. It is 2026. This is happening right now as we speak. So my question is, when will we learn from history? When will we learn? It's not just in the Bible. It's in your history books. It's in doctrine. It's in the historical text. When will we learn to get away from this Babylonian type mindset? There is hope, because you have people like me that are teaching you about these things, that are teaching you, hey, Jesus warns against this type of culture. Jesus warns against greed. So you already know what it is, right? So don't worry. I'm going to teach you how to identify it, so that when this comes about, you can teach other people, hey, let's stay away from this greedy mindset. So let's get into it. Review real quick. Greed is characterized by an insatiable self-desire for more, often accompanied by chronic lack of satisfaction and empathy, right? Key indicators include hoarding behavior, manipulating others for personal gain, zero-sum thinking, envy of others' success, and prioritizing personal gain over ethics. So let's go back for a little bit. Notice that someone has a hoarding behavior, or if you yourself have hoarding behavior, that's greed. You manipulate others for your own personal gain. For instance, these get-rich-quick schemes, these pyramid schemes. If you've ever been a part of one, you remember back. I think it was the like the late 2010s, say about around 2010s, about 2012. So I was in college then. But yeah, everybody kept approaching me with this, hey, you give me this amount of money, then you get this money back. The only person that's benefiting it is the guy up top. That is a pyramid scheme, what we call manipulating others for personal gain. If you've been a part of that, or if you're doing that, guess what? That's greed. Zero-sum thinking. Now, this primarily means, for those of you who don't know, the old saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Basically, what that means. Now, if this is how you think, when somebody loses something, you think you gain something from someone losing something? That's greed. It's greed. Or envy towards other people's success. That is also greed. If you prioritize, oh, I got all this money, I got all these houses, I got all these cars, over helping someone or helping the community, that's greed. Common contexts of greed include the workplace, where leaders may exhibit extreme overconfidence, arrogance, and short-term thinking to secure bonuses. In relationships, greed can manifest as transactions replacing intimacy, where individuals are used as tools. 7 key behavioral indicators also. So, if you don't learn anything else in this video, write this down. This is important. Here are your key behavioral indicators of greed. Number 1, we have an insatiable desire, saying that a never enough attitude, where the focus on accumulating rather than satisfaction. Number 2, we have a lack of empathy, a disregard for feelings, needs, or well-being of others to achieve personal goals. Zero-sum thinking, the belief that for someone to win, another must lose. They cannot celebrate others' success. Number 4, self-centeredness. Conversations and actions revolve around me, myself, and I. Number 5, manipulation and credit theft. using others as tools for gain and taking care of credit for work done by others. Number 6, envy. Ooh, one of 7 deadly sins. A strong desire not just for more, but for what others possess. Number 7, ethical compromise. Bending rules or ignoring boundaries to acquire more. So if any of those 7, if you recognize that within yourself or with other people, that in itself is greed. Now, I could end the video right here, but I want to go deeper. Now, a couple days ago, we talked about the Old and New Testament examples of greed. So today, we're going to dive deep into the rich fool story. And he, meaning Jesus, and he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. That sounds good, right? But it's not. Let's keep going. But God said to him, you fool! This very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. When the wealthy man surveyed his barns, he envisioned a future filled with comfort and ease. However, he overlooked that he was merely a steward of these resources, not their ultimate owner. Everything we possess is entrusted to us by God, and we are not owners but merely managers. This parable serves as a reminder of the illusion of control that accompanies financial prosperity. While we accumulate wealth, it's tempting to believe that we have mastered the future. However, true financial freedom lies in recognizing that we are managers or stewards of our own resources, not owners. The term "you fool" echoes hauntingly in the parable as God addresses the wealthy man. Why? Because he neglected to prepare for his ultimate reckoning, which assesses the state of his soul rather than the size of his barns. We will all face this final reckoning where the value of our lives will be evaluated. And here's a crucial revelation. It won't be determined by the size of your bank account. It doesn't matter how successful you are. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter how much you have, how much you stop, how much you put away for whatever reason, whatever funds you have. It doesn't matter. Only what you do for Christ will last. It says so verbatim in this book. In preparation for this, we should be asking ourselves questions like, have we followed God's guidance in our financial matters? And the second one, have we managed the resources God entrusted us effectively? For those of you who have all this money and have all these things, ask yourself this: have I stewarded this properly according to God's word? Have I helped somebody that can't help themselves right now? Have I gave money in church? If not give money in church, have I given to a charity? Have I given to somebody less fortunate than I am? If you haven't, I encourage you to go ahead and start today. It's easy to get caught up in the success cycle. Earn more, save more, and store it all away for a better future. However, in this parable, the rich fool, Jesus warns against this narrow-minded approach. The rich man believed he had achieved the ultimate goal by fulfilling his barns to the brim, but he overlooked a crucial aspect: the impermanence of life. While it is wise to plan for the future, and it is wise, I'm not saying anything against that. It's wise to plan for the future. But this story serves as a reminder that excessive focus on material wealth can blind us to the more important aspects of life: relationships, spiritual growth, and well-being for our souls. Stockpiling assets like the rich man's large barns can be a short-sighted strategy if it diverts our attention from what God has called us to do. I understand that you got to get it for you and yours. You got to get it for the future. You don't know what can happen. I get that. But you also got to remember that God has the final say so, no matter what goes on in this world. So if he kept you safe then, he'll keep you protected now. There are times where even myself that I would be like, no, I got to put money aside for here. I got to put aside for that. Because if we don't, we're going to be broke. But at the end of the day, I had to remember that God supplies all of my needs according to his riches. So I don't have to worry about what I'm going to eat or how I'm going to put gas in my tank or all this other stuff, because God is going to make a way for it to happen. He has several times, and he'll keep doing it as long as I'm here on this earth and I keep serving him. He will make a way out of no way. To identify greed, you must notice someone's hoarding behavior, the way they manipulate others for their personal gain, their zero-sum thinking, their envy for others, and they prioritize success over ethics. It is also indicated by an insatiable desire, lack of empathy, zero-sum thinking, as I said earlier, and self-centeredness. Also, manipulation, envy, and an ethic compromise. All of these things you can identify. If you identify any of those things that I've mentioned, it is greed. It is not of God. Next video, we're going to talk about how to overcome it. Since you know how to identify it and you know what it means. So, if you don't learn anything else from me today in this video, learn this. Know that life is not about waiting on the storm to pass. It is about learning to dance in the rain. May God bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he turn his face towards you and give you peace in Jesus' name. That is all for the Maestro Show, guys. I will see you next time.